Yes, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Three More Points podcast. Today we talk about what MARESCA'S got to do with the current uptake in form of Jadon Sancho, Christopher Nkunku, and who should Chelsea's captain be? Let's get into it. Yes, guys, welcome back to another video. Welcome to another episode of the Three More Points podcast. Of course, you know the co-host is the guy called Henry, or a guy called Henry, who has hit 3,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. Congratulations, Harry. Not only that, but we've got a victory to discuss today. How are you doing? How was your weekend?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. It was good. It was a content weekend because the boxing, it was on in America. It was Canelo Alvarez fighting on Sunday. So, yeah, it's a busy little period for the boxing at the minute because we've got AJ fighting Dubois again this coming weekend. So yeah, mate, the channel's growing really fast. So, yeah, I'm really happy with it.
Good, mate. Well, it's a busy week for Chelsea as well. We've got the massive West Ham at the weekend and Barrow next Wednesday, which I'm sure everybody is very, very excited about. Yeah. First time, I think, since 1948 or 1949 where we played them in the FA Cup. Fun fact. My weekend was great, to be fair. I actually watched football all day from the early kickoff. Like, I don't like these 8 p.m. Saturday games. I think it's just another, especially like from where we live, like you're Australia, I'm Bali, like it's stupid o'clock, but like to say to me, there's football on from 8:30 until flipping 5 in the morning is dangerous.
Yeah, well, my time difference is going to go back to 11 hours soon, and then I'll be all up for the 8 p.m.s again. That'll be fine.
That's good, because that's first thing in the morning for you.
Exactly. Beautiful, mate.
Well, what do you think about this game then? Because I'm going to shove a momentum graph, which I think is quite an interesting concept, actually, up on the screen now that you guys can see. The way that the game went, it didn't feel as though what I can see right now, I'll explain it to you. Basically, there's like spikes that you can see for Bournemouth at the top, and then blue spikes for Chelsea at the bottom, which shows like the intensity of the momentum of an attacking play. I really don't feel as though we were in control of the game until maybe like the last 20 minutes. How do you feel as though it went? And were you surprised that we actually kept a clean sheet and won?
Yes. Well, surprise might not be the right word, but definitely like you wouldn't have been upset if Bournemouth had walked away with at least a point. Like I thought they played really well. They're a good solid team. We were away from home, and the momentum definitely shifted in the second half. You could feel it. Those halftime changes, we're going to get into those, but I think they made a massive difference for the side. And obviously, our boy Jadon Sancho, in the headlines for Chelsea for all the right reasons, not because of any obscure positional play, but he just came on and did a great job. But no, mate, I think that I haven't seen the graph, but I assume it reflects what we saw, which was that it was very, very end to end, especially in the first half. I think they had more of the game. And then, yeah, I think second half it was us. It was our game. I thought we controlled it well. I thought the changes worked well. Yeah. How about you?
Just for a pure thought exercise, right? I'm going to throw one back at you now. Could you give us as obviously a lot of people thought your Jadon Sancho shout last week was just pure lunacy, which, fair enough. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But just because I feel like for the start of a new podcast episode, I want to keep the energy as high as we possibly can throughout the entire pod today. Can you just give me your thoughts on Anthony Taylor, just so that I can hope that someone can kind of vindicate the way I still feel about the man on a very, very beautiful Tuesday morning, but his bald head is still reflecting off of certain lights that I look into. I can still see him in the back of my mind, just pissing me off. So, do you actually genuinely think that there is something about him as a referee that maybe he shouldn't even ref? Or am I just always exaggerating? Because you know what I'm like. I do like to get carried away. It's
just welcome to the circus, isn't it? He's just an absolute clown. I have no love for the guy, and I think honestly, and I think Mark Goldbridge talks about this a lot. The overall standard of refereeing in the Premier League is just so far off the mark. It's a joke, and he just exemplifies it for me. He's terrible, and that game, they were taking the piss in the commentary because they were like, "Oh, we'll remember it as the battle of the what's the name of the stadium Bournemouth playing again?"
The Vitality.
Yeah, the battle of the Vitality, and they were taking the piss because they were like, "It's not even been that kind of game, and yet we've broken the yellow cards record." It's an absolute joke, and he just managed the game really poorly. And I can't stand these referees that make it about them, and I think that's what he does. And no patience with the guy. He's had enough.
I think the problem with it is, I understand that he's he's literally knows the rules of the game. So now that you're supposed to like book a player for dissent, like even the smallest amount of dissent, you give a yellow card for now, which I think is a problem because what it actually does is it affects the quality of the football. Like for a game like this that should be end to end because Bournemouth are going to attack, they're at home. Chelsea, obviously, we've got some great players that can counter. We've got blistering pace on the counter. But when you start throwing yellow cards around willy-nilly, it kind of brings everyone into the shell. So, like, if you're talking about, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the talk at the moment is about, like, oh, we've got to make games more entertaining. We've got to give extra minutes at the end of the first half, extra minutes at the end of it. It's all to just try and draw eyes and attention to the Premier League because the money is obviously so big for the television. But what it really does with all of these new little rules for such menial things is it brings the players like into a shell again. Like if you're on a yellow card and you're an attacking fullback, chances are you're not going to be as attacking anymore as you would have been without a yellow or without the fear of being yellow carded for the most like. And for me, it's the fact that he was missing fouls that were actual fouls. Yeah. Which just makes me look at it and like I'm just thinking, can I even enjoy this as a spectacle anymore? Is this even a football match that I'm invested in?
100%. And
because it's skewed.
Yeah, you want physicality, you want aggression, you want players to feel like they can make an error and not get instantly yellow carded for it. Because like not all fouls that are not great are yellow cards. Like sometimes someone will just mistime a tackle a little bit or whatever. It's those tactical fouls, those professional fouls where you're trying to like stop the team from attacking that, that's when you should really come down on players. But, he wasn't even actually going by the letter of the law, George, because like you say, he missed fouls that actually were cards. And then I think for sure there would have been a couple of players sent off if he had actually been implementing the rules as they're designed. So I just feel like he got really trigger happy with the yellow cards early on, and then he thought, crap, I'm going to have to be consistent with this now. And ended up giving so many yellow cards when actually, like, you need to let a few of those go and let the game flow a bit more. And just that threshold for a yellow card needs to be a bit higher than what he was putting in that game at the weekend. And it could have ruined it. And especially when, we're a team that, like you say, we want to break with speed, we want to break with pace, we want to press high. If we're going to be in there with a trigger happy referee, like that is going to really affect the way we play. So, yeah. Don't want to get too much 100%. Into referees, but it wasn't great, was it?
I do want to know your thoughts on Renato Vega, because as we go through this video, I think we should look at the reasons why we probably weren't at our best, but also at the same time, I think we can universally agree that to see Chelsea win 1-0 and almost shithouse our way to a win by not playing very well and then stealing it at the end, like that's Brilliant. What I want to see from Chelsea. But I think Vega, as much as like we can talk about the footballing side of things from him, he kind of is giving me this little bit of the shithousery that we were speaking about last week. We were talking about arseholes in the last podcast.
I remember.
Why the video did so well, I think. I think Renato Vega's got an element of that about him. What did you think of his performance?
So the first thing I'd say about him is I think he's an excellent squad option. I got into a little bit of a discussion with someone in your comments last week where they were saying, because they were replying to our statement that we only had 3 sort of viable central midfield options, and they then listed off all these other players, and I had a little back and forth with them, but basically I just said that because they listed Vega as one of them, and I just said, I take your point as a depth option, but I don't see him as an actual option at central midfield. But actually watching that game, fair play to that person, because he actually did pretty well. He was solid, thought positionally he was good. Yeah, he brought a solidity to the midfield that when Enzo's playing, we kind of are lacking, I think. And he was just really tidy with his passing. And I don't think, he's a long-term solution in that position by any means. But I'm so happy we got him for the price we did. I'm so happy he's in the squad. And actually, looking at the way that Cucurella played in that game, where he was very central when we were going forward, really inverted. The second half, he was basically an advanced 10 at times. To know that we've got Vega in the squad that can come in and do something similar in terms of how he can hold himself in the middle of the pitch, I think that's really, really encouraging. What did you make of him, George?
I think it's interesting that you said that, because you're talking about a solidity that he brings that we don't necessarily have when Enzo Fernandez is there. I think as much as I do kind of agree with it, just purely from like a physical standpoint, like he's quicker. Enzo's got a good engine. He keeps going for a long time, but there isn't really like any like poise with it, if you know what I mean. Like he's not like bursting a lung and then making a tackle and then sprinting with the ball that he's just won up the other end of the pitch. Whereas I think Vega can have that, but he is just slightly erratic. I think positionally in the first half, it was kind of like oh shit, like this isn't Servette in the Conference League anymore. This is a Premier League game against the team that are going to swarm us, basically. Bournemouth were very good in that first half when it came to like that man-for-man marking that we saw. We'll talk about Cole Palmer in a second and how he was basically marked out of the game. Yeah. But I think Cucurella's positional play in the second half, I'm looking at him and I'm like, is he actually playing as like a second striker right now? Yeah. Like, what the hell is he doing all the way up there? And if you look at the heat map, you can see how he's literally in the final third. Yeah. So I think we're seeing here potentially a plan B from Maresca, where if you do have that like solid brick, I'm going to call him, Renato Vega in the middle, with Caicedo just doing the lung-busting runs that we saw in this game, then I think there's a world where we could actually have like a flat back four and still have Cucurella advanced up the field. I thought it was actually a very interesting tactical battle that we actually saw progression from Chelsea to actually control the game more.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, well, the Cucurella role just really, really interested me in the game. And some of the positions he was getting into to link play and to lay off the ball to other players were the positions that we saw Enzo taking up when he was in the side, where he would get further forward and he'd make those little intricate passes up top. So it kind of potentially reduces his importance to the side. You know, when Lavia's fit and he's able to play where Vega is, then then you've got an interesting dilemma and an interesting system and a potential solution to having, to lacking Enzo's passing game in that midfield. I think that's the kind of thing everyone's saying at the minute. Lavia's passing game isn't quite as good. Caicedo's passing game isn't quite as good. So, but and I think, to be honest, George, like coming away from that performance, the one thing I would say is I noticed that we needed someone to control the tempo, someone to control the forward passes and create those key passes. And that's when you say, like, we need Enzo, but also Enzo's not quite doing it yet. So that is the number one thing right now for me that the side is missing, is that sort of number 6, that player that can sit deep and start moves and all that sort of thing, The pacemaker.
I think that's the thing that at the moment when we're looking at it, and I'm like thinking about how I feel about the performance throughout the course of the last couple of days. Obviously, we played on Saturday, made my video on Sunday. Yesterday, I'm looking into it a little bit more. You can see here, we've got the player ratings. You're looking at that and you're like, that's a pretty standard, but like good away performance. You've got a lot of players in there with over a 7 out of 10. But I think it really was that like pacemaker in the middle, that control, so that when we had the ball, did I feel whilst I was watching that game at any point that we were going to have a blistering attack? No. Do I think that Caicedo can get the ball, look up and drive with it? Yes, but is he going to spot that pass whilst in motion to get someone who's better on the ball in a more advanced area on it? At the moment, what we miss when Enzo Fernandez doesn't play, but like you say, if he's not fully up to speed, then is it better to just have more of like the enforcer kind of player? Would you say that Vega kind of fits like an enforcer role? I'm just looking at all of these yellow cards. This is absolutely hilarious. Crazy. But do you think Vega can be that? Do you think he could be molded into that?
Maybe. I think he's at that point where he can kind of become anything right now because he is young, because he's been in that other league and he's been in a different tactical setup. So yeah, like we don't actually know what he's going to be yet. We don't know what his ceiling is. But I think it's like a big show of faith from Maresca that he was willing to put him in that position. Although I think we were kind of limited for options because Lavia was out, Dewsbury Hall was out. So I do think he's a squad depth option. But just to see him do it in a game that we actually managed to win was really encouraging. But you were right. I think I mischaracterized his first half performance for sure. Like I definitely think like we were overrun at times in the first half, but also like his first appearance in that position in the Premier League, from the start as well. Like I think he can improve, and yeah, it's an interesting one, mate. I don't know what he can be, but I think he's a really interesting player. But yeah, one performance I wanted to ask you about your opinion of was, I know you mentioned it in 6 Things We Learned, but was FOFANA, because I thought there was moments where he looked really, really good, but then there was other moments where he very well could have handed them all the points. So I just wonder what you made of his performance.
I think he touched the ball a lot. I think his passing accuracy was like 90%, but then within that 10%, you've got an absolutely atrocious hospital pass back to Sanchez.
Yeah.
And my thoughts on Fofana right now is that, yes, I think him and Colwill could create an incredible partnership at the back. But I think what Wesley Fofana is trying to do is maybe, because he's missed so much football, he's playing the game at too high octane of a level. Like, he's got, like, to put it in, like, terminology that we'll understand barley-wise, right? You've got your bike. You've got a Scoopy, which is like a very cheap, doesn't have that much fuel space. And then you've got, like, an X-Max, which is basically, like, the bigger tank. What he's doing right now is he's using the most expensive fuel in the worst engine, and then he's literally revving as fast as he can as if he's got like a super bike when he's actually got a little one. So I think right now, oh God, what have I done? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like he's just trying too hard at
What you're
times.
saying is he's physically not ready, like, to put in the kind of displays he wants to.
I think he needs to calm down a little bit. I think sometimes he's just all like, and again, I love this because I love the energy that he brings, and I love how it is last ditch, and I love how he's constantly trying to release the ball quickly, but in the process of doing that, sometimes like you cannot make mistakes in the Premier League against any opposition in the way that he did. And he puts, well, I mean, Sanchez, flipping well done Sanchez. I never thought 4 games into a season I'd be making a reel and a short dedicated to praising Robert Sanchez, but bloody hell was he fantastic.
Yeah. Well,
I think Fofana needs to calm down.
Yeah, I absolutely slated Sanchez last pod, and you know, it's like you said in Six Things. You know, like, all you want is to be proven wrong. And look, I've not changed my opinion on Sanchez based on one outlier performance where he was suddenly very good. But now I know he can do that. That makes me expect even more of him. Now there's no excuse for me. Like, he needs to hit those levels regularly. And that's what it's all about. Do it for the next 6 months and then we can talk. Do you know what I mean? So
I 100% agree with you. That's exactly where I feel on it too, where it's like people say, oh, well, if he makes a mistake in the next game, you'll criticize him. Yes! That's what football is, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
You've got to do it at a level where, like, for example, we can say Cole Palmer now. We can talk about him. This is a perfect example. Cole Palmer, in this game, was probably at his least effective compared to, like, what he's normally like. If you look at, like, what Palmer does in a match, and if you were to summarize it normally, it would be amazing pass to a teammate who scored, or he scored a hat-trick. Like, Palmer is a game changer. He's a match winner. But sometimes if that player, in this case Palmer, is being marked out of the game, then you need your goalkeeper to step up and make that difference. But I think Chelsea are going to have an issue moving forward because I think a lot of teams will look at what Bournemouth did. I think it was Cook for Bournemouth who basically just made sure that Palmer could never really get into any space. You could see that he was getting frustrated. He wanted to be on the ball more. Obviously, that's healthy. And he couldn't really do much about it. He couldn't really shake it off, which is probably why Chelsea didn't look as though we were creating that much quality. What do you think we're going to have to do when it comes to finding someone else on the pitch like we did in the second half? But if Palmer is being marked out of the game, and we are still obviously quite reliant on him for making things happen, what can we do to combat this? Like, is it a case of a bit more dynamism in the final third, or does Palmer need to pull it out more?
Well, just quickly to your point on Sanchez, just before we move on from that, you know, Mendy was one of the best goalkeepers in the world when we won the Champions League for a period of like 6 months, and then suddenly he was nothing. So it's one of them, like, you know, you can get these hot streaks with players and then a purple patch, as they call it, and then they're off the cliff. So yeah, we need to see consistency. So just want to say that quickly. When it comes to finding a plan B with Cole Palmer, mate, I think we've got it in abundance, and that is the most exciting thing about this squad, exemplified by those halftime changes, Jadon Sancho coming on. And mate, it was really, really good to see that there's other players in the squad that can make stuff happen. Because last season we were, you know, we had the piss taken out of us constantly for being Cole Palmer FC, which I don't have a problem with as long as we're winning games. Like, Cole Palmer's brilliant. I love watching Cole Palmer. But and I think there is a lot to be said for having that. You know, we had it with Hazard for years, that talismanic player. You know, letting that real attacking talent have the freedom and space to go and run the game, no problem. But yes, you do have to have other ways around it. And I think that, you know, I think that was something that I would say about Noni Madueke in this game was there was a clear moment I remember where he chose to shoot instead of pass to Cole Palmer. And I think that something Madueke, sorry, this is a slight segue, but something Madueke's got to learn is that sometimes passing makes him a more dangerous player because then there's more indecision. Like, defenders don't know what you're going to do as much if you do sometimes look for that early pass, or, it's about with him, it's just about making the right decisions. And, you're going to have even more success on the dribble, even more success shooting if players are less sure of what you're going to do. But yeah, with Cole Palmer, in that game, like I said to you after the game, like, bro, like Palmer, non-existent in that game, but we found other ways of doing it. And we were talking about relationships in the previous pods, that relationship that Madueke and Palmer look like they're building. Similar thing with Cucurella and Sancho. I thought that the two of them were linking up really, really nicely when Sancho came on. And, eventually the chance came from that side. And Nkunku goes and gets the goal. But, the way we emptied our bench, the way João Felix came on, Sancho came on, and Nkunku came on, and you're just like, damn, like we might be able to just power our way 2 wins, especially in games like that where it's 50-50. And that's what actually excited me about the clean sheet. Clean sheets win championships. That's what everybody, defense wins championships. That's what they say in all sports. If you've got that defensive solidity, there's always an opportunity for someone to go and have that, as you talked about in your 6 Things video, that individual moment where they go and win you the game. And that's what we had with Sancho and Nkunku combining. It was kind of like, it wasn't like a great passing move to get us there. It was more just sort of like Sancho gets the ball, he gets it into Nkunku's feet. And I actually thought it was really good play from Nkunku. Like, you could say it was a bit lucky, but when you actually watch it, he's so strong. He's holding off like 3 defenders. He bounces off one of them. I don't know if any of the defenders actually touched the ball. I think he just bounced off, found a bit of space. And then what I loved about it was the composure on the finish. It's right into the side netting. Like, it's going in a space where I know no one can get it. So the amount of quality we have in the squad now is just absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, we can find ways to win when Palmer's not on it, for sure.
I think that it kind of highlighted to me where the difference is between what we suffered through last season could be very different this year, which again makes me very excited because we suffered for a large portions of last year and finished 6th, not far away from Villa in 4th. So the fact that now, there's no doubt in my mind that if we played the same match again, with the same yellow cards, with the same, not necessarily the same players, but the same flow of the game, the same momentum, we don't win that match. We definitely don't keep a clean sheet.
You win it 50% at the time. It's one of them.
And I think this season, when like you say, when you've got Felix off the bench, you've got Nkunku off the bench, Sancho off the bench, like, you're not taking off bad players and then bringing your best ones on. You're taking off good players, and then the plan B doesn't have to be let's be reactive and wait until 10 minutes to go and then try to make something happen. Yep. And it's interesting with Nkunku now because there is going to be a lot of people based on that. And I agree with this. I've been saying about Jackson, I'm like, give him a chance, back him, keep him in the team. But it's so interesting now with the amount of quality that we've got. Christopher Nkunku, like, what did we buy him for? We bought him because he was a finisher. We bought him because he can do exactly what Jackson couldn't do in that game, which was Jackson got in good positions. And sometimes when you look at a Jackson miss, you're like, what? How have you missed that? Like, the misses weren't bad misses, but they weren't great finishes. So I think with Nkunku, for example,
very nice.
The good thing with him is Palmer as a 10, even when he's being marked out of the game, you can't bring him off if you're not winning 3 or 4-0. You just can't, because he is going to make something happen, like he did against Man United at home. Like, that is all Cole Palmer and the footballing brain and the ability to just pull it out the bag. That's what we need to keep out there. But now, I think Nkunku, for me, and this is obviously a big talking point in the pod today, we want to talk about the changes, the substitutions within that squad depth conversation. But, like, how much do we focus on continuity and making sure that we don't just react by seeing like an average performance and then take the guy out the team? Or is it actually that's what we have to do? Yeah. And I'm going to say with Nkunku, like, he's got to start against West Ham because you can't take that finishing quality out of a team when he's that good. And I think it's not his fault that Palmer's just so good in that 10.
It's basically continuity versus reward. And by reward, what I mean is, like, how much do you reward the guys that come on and do well when you're also trying to build those connections on the pitch? Because, like, the number one thing that the guys need right now is playing time together. But equally, we've created a system where there's so many top players that if you don't perform, you need to drop out pretty quickly. because somebody else probably deserves a chance. And if they come on and they take their chance like Nkunku did, as you've just said, it's got to be a meritocracy within that ecosystem. So yeah, I think you're right. I think Nkunku probably should start. What I will say though is that Jackson didn't finish his chances. They weren't super easy, any of them, but like you say, they weren't bad misses, they weren't great finishes. But what I will say is I do think he leads the line really well, and I think he's really growing as a centre forward. I do. Like the way he runs behind the back line, the way that he tries to hold the ball up and bring other players into play. I do think he's doing a good job of that. He's just got to add in that finishing ability now. And honestly, bro, like the misses he had in the game, he might only be a bit of development away from actually putting those away. Because like they weren't bad misses, like you say. And I could see the technique was there. He just didn't get it quite right. Do you know what I'm saying? Like when he made those misses in the game. So I feel like
this is the interesting part because Nkunku probably. Well, I mean, look, he did finish his chance. Like so what he gets one chance and scores.
Yeah. So what I was going to say was it's also about balancing Jackson's development. So this is the challenge that we have, but we have to win. So yeah, I agree with you. Overall, it's winning at the end of the day. So Nkunku has to come in, but it is challenging because then you also say, does Sancho start ahead of Neto, which was what I wanted to talk to you about because I have this sense now that we were playing obviously against a Bournemouth side that had quite a low block. And I feel like maybe there's different players for different tactical situations in games. So I think that, for example, when there's a lot of space behind your opposition, I think Neto's your guy. He's got pace to burn. He gets the cross in. He gets his head up. He looks at what's available to him. Whereas I think if we're playing low blocks, as we saw in that game, I think Sancho might be a guy because he's I'd say he's probably not as fast as Neto in a straight line. But what he is probably better than Neto at is running one-on-one at a man, creating indecision in them, going one way, going the other way, and then finding a pass. So I just think we've got different types of wingers for different situations, and it's really exciting. So it'll be a mixture of who's performed well, what kind of teams we play against, and also what kind of continuity do we have, who's building relationships, and it's balancing those three factors, basically.
If you look at these graphs, it's not a graph, it's a flipping pitch, it's a heat map here. You can see Neto in that first half, he's kind of trying to get on the ball in basically all phases of that left-hand side of the pitch, whereas with Sancho, and again, this is why you're spot on about playing against the low block. Look at the position there that Sancho's on the ball. It's around the box. If you're struggling to break a team down because they're sat with all their defenders in there, they're making it difficult, they're marking out your best players, all you need to do is get your guys that can make something happen on the ball closer to the goal. That is the only way that Chelsea can improve playing against low blocks. We've struggled with this for so long.
Years.
And it's because we're too happy to have possession of the ball and kind of hope that we make a breakthrough. Whereas what Sancho wanted to do, and this is why Cucurella was so important, because if you look at Cucurella's heat map here, so much of that in the final third is in the attacking phase, is in the second half when Sancho's on the pitch. And Sancho's literally on the ball the majority of the time, just outside that box. And then you've got someone making the movements Nkunku does, and voila, you got yourself a flipping goal. Yep. But I think this is the exciting part now about where Chelsea can change that we can't break down low blocks anymore. Because now we could even start Neto in those games and then bring Sancho off the bench. Yep. And it's about, I guess, with both of these players, like they've both come in. Probably Sancho is different because he just wanted to get out of Man United. Neto's come in and didn't expect to be substituted 4 games into the season by Jadon Sancho. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Like Neto's come in thinking, right, I'm the winger now. Mudrik's not the guy. I know he's not the guy, as in Neto's thinking, like, I'm going to take this guy out of the team. And then, like, Neto puts in a bang average performance and then gets hoiked at half-time, but Chelsea win the game. So there's a lot of people saying at the minute, Noni Madueke, and this is so funny. Like people say it's recency bias, but also like there is a valid point to be had potentially. Like if one of these wingers has like an average performance or doesn't score or doesn't get an assist, like does Neto now start on the right and Madueke come out because Madueke didn't put in a good performance against Bournemouth, and then Sancho start on the left? Like, is it that dramatic and drastic? Could it be?
I think Madueke played okay. I don't think he had a bad game. I thought Neto had a worse game.
I don't think he was bad.
No, I thought Neto had a worse game than Madueke, to be honest with you. I thought Madueke carried the ball well still. But also I think with Noni, because he is so good at dribbling one-on-one against the man, I feel like he can play in any kind of situation. I think like whether it's a low block, whether there's lots of space to run to, he's got that speed, but he's also got that close control. I'm not saying Neto doesn't, by the way. I'm just saying I'm not sure he's quite as good as the players we've just mentioned at that stuff. But Yeah, mate, it's really interesting. I was just thinking as you were talking there, like we do seem to have like players that can fit into very distinctive playing styles. I feel like at the end there, we were struggling to break them down. So we brought on the players that can play in those tight spaces. Like Nkunku's better in tight spaces than Jackson. You know, João Felix is better in tight spaces than Madueke, and the same thing with Neto and Sancho. So it's just great. I mean, the options we have are brilliant. And it is just making sure that, you know, we are solid enough that we can get to those points in the game where like those changes are matter and are significant. I have to give a big shout out to Moises Caicedo, actually, because I thought that the way he recovered the ball in this game, the way he tackled and defended, I thought he was so important. Like, if we hadn't had him on the pitch, I think we would have been in big trouble. Like, if that had been Vega and Enzo, for example, I think that game goes a different way. I think Caicedo's contribution was absolutely massive. And, you know, it's so funny because we were talking last week about our team now and our team in 6 months. But some of those players that we said would be in the team in 6 months, we're already talking about putting them in for the next game. So that's how tumultuous this is going to be. Like, I said Nkunku should play in 6 months probably because of the extra finishing ability. So it's one of them. And I said I didn't think Caicedo would be there in 6 months. Now I'm saying, you know, he was the most important player on the pitch probably in terms of the win. So yeah, mate, it's so hard to read. We're going to change our opinions a lot. I think we just need, at the moment, I think what we need is a good like block of 15 games. So we can actually like have some, you know, a larger sample size of like who plays well in what kind of situation. I think that's the thing right now. It's so early still.
Yeah, I think it's good that we've managed to find a way to be excited about not only like the battering wins, like the 6-2 against Wolves is like shit, like we're going to blow teams away. Yeah. It's exciting to score 6 goals every flipping day of the week. But now to win in that style too, like I said earlier, it almost feels as though it's a bigger and better result. And I think the exciting thing is we're debating here about continuity or make the changes. And I think if Maresca can manage to make everybody understand exactly what you've just pinpointed there, and I think it's so good that we've managed to home in on this, we have got the personnel to be adaptable in-game, but also based on the starting lineup for the opposition. Like, it doesn't mean that Sancho, just because he's better in tight spaces than Neto, but Neto's got that blistering pace for a counter-attack. It doesn't mean that if you're playing against a team with a low block, that Neto can't come off the bench and make a difference. Because we're talking about players here that just have a lot of flipping ability. And I think Chelsea this season, as much as we're going to have a few potential 6-2 wins, we might score 6 goals, we might have a few 1-0 snatch and grabs. Like, there's going to be some games where, like, you use the word tumultuous. Like, it's going to be up and down. It's going to be crazy. But if you've got all of those players available to change a game, like, that's exactly what we need to do. Substitutions. This is why I love what Maresca's done so far this season. The substitutions aren't, oh, let's wait and see if for the next half an hour of the second half we're going to improve. He just does it. Half-time, he's like, nah, Neto's not working, Sancho on. Yeah. Sancho grows in the game, gets an assist. Unbelievable management, I think.
And mate, also, like, it has to be said, one of the reasons we got so pissed off with Pochettino last season at times was because we were like, yeah, Poch, we get it. Like, they're a young group. They're trying to learn your tactics, but you've got to find a way to get 3 points. You've got to have that plan that just, like, gets you results. And I feel like if we can, in amongst all of this development, figuring things out, players in and out the side, learning the system, learning the playing style, if we can still pick up results, that is so important, because then when we do hit the second half of the season and we get to the business end of the season, if we're then actually in a rhythm of, yeah, we know how to grind out results, but also now we're starting to really understand this system and who does what well, then, you know, who knows where we might be at the end of the season. It's really exciting.
A lot of people are saying, like, oh, it's not really Maresca ball. Like, it's like, stop identifying every manager and putting the word ball on the end of it. And if it isn't exactly as you've read on the flipping baked bean tin, then it's wrong. Like, there's obviously been an interesting interview done with Mikel and Gary Cahill about Sarri ball. And Gary Cahill didn't really understand what Sarri ball was. But I think with Maresca ball, like, it's I think Enzo Maresca ball isn't necessarily the way that we should define whether or not Chelsea are getting it and he's the right manager. Like, a few people have messaged me saying, like, oh yeah, but it's not really the way Maresca wants to play. It's just because we've got good players. I'm like, just shut up moaning about flipping
but mate,
Maresca for a second.
But I'll be worried if if every season we're gauging what Maresca ball is based on what he did at Leicester, because every single season the Premier League evolves. Pep Guardiola is always the guy who's like one step ahead of everybody else. They'll catch up with him, then he changes again, and he's always trying to tactically stay one step ahead. So I'll be concerned if we've brought a manager in Maresca that's just like, this is how my teams will always play. Like, that's not... I understand he'll have basic principles, but he needs to evolve every season, and especially at a club like Chelsea where winning is absolutely number one. You know, you've got to be worried if he's not adapting and evolving. So yeah, any signs that he's doing that and we're still picking up results, happy days for me.
100%. Now, a lot of you guys will know who Football Therapy is. Jan's a good friend of mine. And I saw yesterday on Instagram, and I really wanted to talk to you about this today, and I didn't even mention it before the pod that we're going to discuss it.
Okay.
But he made a very good statement about Ben Chilwell and how, when you look at how good Sancho was in that second half, a lot of it is down to how he links up in those tight spaces. There's players close to him. Look at Cucurella advancing up the field, coming in central areas, but also just being more of like a traditional back four, left back, gets forward, gets back and does his defensive duties. Do you think, based on what we've seen from Chilwell over the years at Chelsea and how good he was at times as an attacking fullback, Chilwell's now in the Premier League squad. Obviously, there might be a fair amount of sorries and forgiveness and all that bollocks to go through because obviously he was shunned out. I don't really agree with the way it was done, but whatever. Do you think there's a way here, based on what we just saw from Sancho, do you think there's a way that Ben Chilwell is a really good option for a game like that against Bournemouth, potentially? Not saying that Cucurella did bad, but do you think that could be an option, Ben Chilwell back in this team to link up with Sancho?
So I was going to mention this to you, actually. I saw a quote from Maresca recently that they're going to reintegrate Chilwell because they were saying apparently he's been training well and they were like, we want him to leave. That's why he was training separately. But like, well, I think he's going to rejoin the first team training was what Maresca said, something to that effect. So that's obviously like step one of whether or not that can happen. The only area where I'm not being critical of Maresca, but I just question the validity and truth of what he says would be that, so when he said that Gallagher didn't fit his idea of football, which is why he was happy for him to go. But then I look at the game and I'm like, you can't tell me that Gallagher wouldn't play better than Vega in that role, for example. You know, like, so I understand his ultimate vision of football might not fit Conor Gallagher's profile, but like, I don't believe that he didn't have a role to play in the squad. Same thing with Chilwell. When Chilwell's fit and firing, we've seen what he can do. He's brilliant. So I think it's more about the fact that they wanted to move these players on. With Chilwell, it's a bit different because we don't get that 100% profit, you know, thing that we got with Gallagher from him being an academy player. Although he's been at Chelsea a long time now, so we've probably like amortized or whatever you call it, a lot of his value. So it probably would be a big profit if you sold him. But I do think it's mostly to do with trying to make profits on him. In terms of whether or not I think he could play in the side, yeah, definitely. But I just think the problem with Chilwell is like he needs to be fit for a long period of time. Like I've not seen Chilwell play at the levels I know he can for a really long time now. So for me, it's not really a question of like Chilwell's ceiling. I think he's a brilliant player, a brilliant left back, but when was the last time I saw him play really well in a Chelsea shirt? Like, it's been a while.
I totally agree with you. And I think if he can somehow be reintegrated into the squad, I think even like, you know, you got your players like your Bettinellis and everyone's like, oh, Bettinelli's there for the vibes, you know? Like, if Chilwell can, like, be happy, I guess, around the squad, I think he could be useful there.
Yeah, Tom Heaton at the Euros. You say,
yeah, exactly. Like, you need those players in a team.
He's vice-captain as well, bro. He's still the vice-captain.
He's vice-captain. But, like, and we're going to talk about captains here at the end of this pod. We're going to discuss the rankings for who should be Chelsea captain when people are fit. And I guess this is a perfect time to segue into that because, like, if Chilwell's fit, then yes, I think he could absolutely play, even if it's just off the bench towards the end of the game. Yes, he's not a left winger, but yes, he can be useful in the final third. What are we going to do about this captaincy thing? Because Moises Caicedo was the Chelsea captain, and I'm like, fair enough. Like, I don't necessarily think he's the most vocal player in the squad, but like he is doing a lot of work in the defensive phase. He's trying to get the ball forward. But there's one man who you can see on the field every single time he plays, shouting at everybody, getting involved, being a bit of an arsehole, getting up into the face of the referee, somehow getting away with it in that case. Levi Colwill here. He's seen in a huddle giving a team talk. Now, I know that Caicedo's English isn't as good as Levi Colwill's. I'd be a bit worried if it was any better than his. But, like, surely Colwill is the best option right now for the captaincy. in my opinion, like we said this last week, but for me, if James isn't fit, if Chilwell, who is technically still a vice captain, isn't there on the pitch, which he probably won't be, surely Colwill makes so much sense because he's actually you can see him doing what captains do on the field.
Yeah. Well, how do you want to go about this, mate? Do you want to figure out like a pool of players that we could select the captaincy from and sort of compare them to them? How do you want to go about this?
Let's get 5 players in our heads, including the club captain, Reece James. Let's create 5 players, and then we rank them in terms of, like, if the other one isn't on the pitch, then it's this guy. Obviously, I don't like all of this, like, multiple captains thing. I think it's a bit annoying, but that is the nature of what Chelsea have. Our club captain is probably one of the best footballers in the league if he's fit, but he's never fit.
Right.
But then do you strip him of the captaincy? No. So Reece James is one of them, for sure.
So what we do... So we'll say everyone's fit, this is the order, and then we'll figure out who's fit, basically, and then that should be the captain. Is that what we're going to do?
I'm going to say 5 players that I think should and could be considered, and then if you have any additional ones, they can go in the swimming pool of potential captains.
Okay, fine. Then we can try and rank them. All right, go. So James is 1.
Okay. Reece James, Levi Colwill,
yeah,
Cole Palmer, Enzo Fernandez... and Moises Caicedo. That's it. That's the only players I think could actually be captain. I'm not going to say Sanchez as a goalkeeper. Other than that, like, I don't really see many captains out there for Chelsea, and that's a bit of a problem. But also, like... Well, I mean, do you have anyone else that you think could actually be a captain? And also, let's define what a captain should be.
I'm just thinking. Those 5 I agree with are in the conversation. And then I keep wanting to say Nkunku, but he doesn't even start right now. But he is a really experienced player. I just don't know what his like position in the squad is like. But if we're saying Caicedo, I think you can say Nkunku. I'm going to put Nkunku down as number 6 just because I think he could be talked about.
Okay.
But anyway, okay. Yeah, that's it. So what should a captain be? I mean, there's different kinds of captains. We know that from over the years. Ideally, for me, it's somebody that leads vocally, that sets the standard, that helps to kind of create that culture and is almost like a second voice for the manager on the pitch. You want it to be someone that can communicate effectively with the referee as well. You don't want someone who's too hot-headed. Ideally, someone that's fit all the time and that will play at like a 7 out of 10 every single game because they've got to lead by example too. So, you know, what's the most important thing? I think you've got to put performance first because you can't have somebody that is great vocal, like that's like me captaining Chelsea. Like maybe I'd be a great vocal leader, but like, I can't kick a ball. So like, you know what I mean? So it's like you've got to have someone that is first and foremost a first team player and will start 90% of the games. That's number 1. Number 2 is they've got to have leadership qualities. So with that in mind, you know, immediately, and we're not necessarily talking about like long term because in an ideal situation, James will get fit and he'll be sorted and everything. But at some point, there would be a conversation: does this guy stay as club captain if he's only playing like 10 games a season? Because it's madness. But for now, looking at those 6 players, you're talking about So Fernandez for me, like I just don't think his performance levels are good enough at the moment for his position. That's like if he was like our, you know, what Fabregas did for us for a season, you know, if he was season or 2, you know, if he was that player that was dictating play, that was running the show, then I'd be a lot more inclined to say I understand why he's considered for captain.
He is quite vocal on the pitch though. You always see him like animated, moving his hands around, and obviously like that is like, and I agree with your comment about Fabregas, and it's like, as much as I don't want to sit here and spend a lot of time comparing Fabregas to Enzo Fernandez, like Enzo Fernandez could do what Fabregas did for Chelsea, but then he also, like, when we're talking about experience as well, like he is probably one of the more experienced players, which is such a ridiculous thing to say, but it's the truth.
Well, he's won big trophies, but for me, it's just that performance level right now is just, I don't think he's consistent enough. And I can say that I'm so comfortable saying that because I know how important that role is for us, and I don't feel like he's performing it to the required standard right now. So I don't think it's just my perspective. I don't think your captain can be somebody who's not performing well enough in their role. Because at the minute, I'm like...
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah, at the minute, I'm like, if he keeps going the way he is, we'll need to find another solution in that position, which is why we talk about Lavia, even though he's barely been fit. You know what I mean? And barely shown us much in a Chelsea shirt so far. So...
yeah, but then I guess if you're talking about potentially players who can't be considered because they're not consistently playing at the highest level, then I guess you also need to talk about the other kind of captain, which is if you give it to the best player, because he's consistent, plays well every game. It's the same as when Kante was the Chelsea captain. The quietest guy on the field, says the least, but because he's the best, like, it makes sense to give him the captaincy. Does that put Cole Palmer in the same category? Because I love what I saw from Palmer, by the way, against Bournemouth, when he's getting in Evan Nilsson's head. Like, this is good. Palmer's also, like, not only the best player, like, we all know that, but, like, he's also, I think, growing in, like, when you step into the scene, like, the football does the talking, and, like, you've seen Palmer's interviews, it's absolute comedy gold. Even him driving the flipping little mini tractor around Cobham in recent pictures in the last couple of days is fantastic. He's flipping hilarious, this bloke.
Yeah.
Like, forget how good he is at football. He's so funny. But I think Palmer actually is going to grow this season. It's like you get like this swagger when you know you're performing at such a level week in, week out. And he's getting like this like cocky arrogance now to like get under the skin of other players. And he's got that like that little bit of fight that I think he maybe needed. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the strongest player. But, like, I think Palmer could very quickly, for me, grow into, like, he absolutely could and should be considered, like, an on-field captain, if not, like, top 3, in my opinion.
Yeah, mate. Pressure is for tires, mate. You know, that's why I like him. He's just great. He... You know, what is there to say about Cole Palmer? The one thing I'll say, and it goes for all these guys, and this is why the lack of experience in the squad is far from ideal, is that you kind of just want to give them space to go and focus on their own performances and just develop. Because, you know, it's got to be hard also, like, carrying the weight of being Chelsea captain at the same time. But because I think he has that demeanour, I think you're right. I think it makes him a top pick out of the players we have, because I don't know if it'll make him feel any more pressure than he already does. So yeah, but then I would say that I think you need to have like good communication skills, and I don't know if Palmer's that great. So I think that for me, if it's not Reece James, but then there are problems with Levi Colwill too, mate. That's the other issue. Because sorry, I'm getting a phone
Well, I mean,
call.
we talk about like you got to be good at being able to speak to the referee, and Levi Colwill is about as hot-headed as they come.
Exactly.
He seems to go through like these phases of the game where if the referee is staring at him close enough, then he's going to get a red card based on the current stupid rules of the Premier League. But for me, like, I always feel as though the more of the pitch a player can see, for me, just like based on like footballing experience as a 30-year-old bloke who's loved sport, played sport, used to be a goalkeeper, like, it's easy for me to shout and say things, not just because I'm a confident speaker, but because I can literally see everything that's going on around me.
Yeah.
So for me, a defender is always going to be, if the other like qualities like being a good speaker, being a leader, being confident, all of these things, if they have that, then a defender makes sense for me. So if it was it was my pick, based on the idea that Reece is fit, Reece is the captain. I think it's correct. Colwill for me would be the second one, just purely because I think he's already in 4 matches this season showing that the performances when he's played in his correct position, it's going up and up. The levels, like, he's the best centre-back right now at Chelsea. He's in form. He's broken into the England side as well. And for me, I think Colwill is the vice-captain at Chelsea right now, ahead of Enzo Fernandez, ahead of Caicedo. And I think as much as, like, I'm not going to sit here and slate Caicedo's English, I don't hear him talk enough. I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's not. But, like, English should be the dominant language that is communicated within that squad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just
Palmer's
think the main
number 3 for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I just think the main thing for me is that looking at this, it's just depressing seeing the armband getting passed around like this. Like, it was such a prestigious thing before. Like, it was Lampard or Terry, basically. And we had so many leaders in that squad as well, so it kind of didn't matter so much who wore the armband. But yeah, it is troubling that it's like, it's not that there's so many good options, but we're so lacking in options to wear the armband. It's bothersome for me. But I think you also look at like ceiling potential to be a leader, and I think Colwill's got that. You know, he's someone that could really grow into the role, and I think that's something you've got to look at too. So I agree with you. I think for me, it's James number 1, Colwill number 2, Palmer number 3, Fernandez 4, and then Caicedo 5.
I think that's it. I think Enzo Fernandez, I understand why they've been giving him the armband. Like, I'm not saying, and again, I feel like based on the 50-minute conversation we've just had, I feel like maybe again people are going to be like, you've been really harsh on Enzo.
Yeah,
and just
maybe.
to clarify what I think both of us feel It's like, be good consistently, deliver consistently, and then the conversation about performances, about the player, is more consistently positive. That's just the truth, I think, at this point, from my side at least. I'm not saying that is gospel, but I think in terms of like the price tag being involved in why someone might be given a captaincy, like, I don't want to think that way. And Enzo is a leader on the field. He is. But I think that it's better to have someone that can see more of what's going on as the captain, as opposed to the guy in the middle. And once more, like, the language thing, again, is so important, I think. Communicating with the referee. Like, the referees are all flipping English. As much as they may be flipping stupid and don't really know what they're doing half the bloody time. Like, Enzo Fernandez's English isn't as good as Reece James's. It's not as good as Levi Colwell's. And I think that has to play into the conversation here. But I think I agree with the list in the same order as you. I think that is the way it should be now. Hopefully, Reece James can get back fit again. The problem is, it's setback. Like,
yeah, we're
I
so
feel
sick
for
of
him,
talking
man.
about
I
it.
do. But at the same time, like, at some point, you've got to make a decision to be like, I mean, I hate even suggesting it, but like he's played like 35 games in 2 years or something, and like I don't even know if that's true. I saw that somewhere random, but like he was supposed to be fit again after the international break, and it's not even in the squad.
He's on one of these mega long contracts as well, so it's one of them where you aren't going to be able to get any money for him really. So I think it's worth with Reece just saying, let's sit tight. Give him all the time he needs to get to some kind of playable shape, and in the meantime have plans in place that mean we don't need him. You know, and that's kind of how you got to be quite ruthless about it. But at the same time, because he's on a mega long contract and we probably can't get any money for him, you just say take the time you need to get your body right, figure it out, whatever it is. You know.
Yeah, I think so. Well, that is our list. Let us know your list in the comments down below. By the way, we are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if for whatever reason you don't want to see our mugs floating around in the various beautiful graphics that we have for the 3 More Points podcast, if you do want to go for a run and still hear everything, then you can listen. The links to that are in the description, as are the links to Harry's channel, but you know, you can ask him about that. He can tell you if he wants to. Whatever you want to call him. I sometimes give him other names that are just completely not fit for the camera.
Not suitable for the pod.
Not suitable for the pod and monetization, which is, of course, what gets food in front of us every day. Harry, have you got anything else you want to say, mate? Because I think this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation.
That's it, mate.
Wrapped up.
Productive discussion. Guys, get over to my channel, a guy called Henry, if you want to get some boxing scoops, some boxing inside thoughts and analysis. That's what I'm doing over there. But no, I've really enjoyed this episode, mate. I think it was a good one. No rogue shouts today.
Me too. No, I mean, I think some people might disagree, but some people also may fully agree. And that is the beauty of the YouTube comments section. Do your worst. I'll see you in a bit.
Cheers, guys.